Thanks for joining us for this episode of Strategic Storytelling.
Jesse and I work together to help people and businesses reach and connect with their communities.
Brian is a visual storyteller, designer, and chief creative officer at Pathfinder.
Jesse is very passionate about entrepreneurship. He's a very loyal person, and he is a very caring individual as well.
In marketing, the storytelling leans on the strategy, but the strategy needs storytelling to be effective.
Agreed. Hello, it's Brian and Jesse again. We're here and talking strategic storytelling, and we're going to start this conversation out with storytelling, right, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, what other better place to start than the title of our show?
Exactly. It's a good thing that we need to kind of
set the tone.
Unravel, set the tone, give everybody an idea like what that actually means is strategic storytelling. So that's we thought that this would be a good place to start.
Yeah.
I think we like to tell our clients is we're telling their story. So what we would like to start off with was kind of some defining what that is. So what makes a compelling story?
Yeah. I think a compelling story is something that obviously, and you see this, I think, in movies and shows and anything else, right?
Yes.
You have to have a plot, right? You have to have a kind of a layout where we have a beginning and some pre-stuff that's explaining, what this is and what this is about. What are we entering into?
Right.
And then, kind of build up from there. I think if you think back to like early school days, you get that little chart that shows the stages of the story.
Oh yeah.
I forget what the first one's called, but then it's like the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution, right?
Right.
I think the same thing fits here too, even talking in storytelling for the purpose of marketing, right?
Right. Well, in a little bit of the research that I did, I found 3 words that work with traditional storytelling and also I think work in the marketing as well. And what you were just explaining was in storytelling, there's conflict, there's context, and then there's continuity. And those all work with traditional storytelling.
Right.
And we can talk about the marketing aspects of that as well.
So I think if you just kind of lay those things out, you're really, I've heard it told a lot of different ways. Some businesses do this better than others based on the planning for it, but and the brand, but also just, some businesses are attuned to this a little easier based on like what they're doing, right? But I've seen, a lot of experts will talk about, you have to have an adversary to your business, and that's that conflict, right? Like who's your adversary and who are you going against? So it doesn't have to be a person. It can be, for marketing, as a marketing agency, I think our adversary is bad marketing, or it's not having the story told in a way that people hear it. Right. Silence is the enemy of good marketing.
Yes.
Or it's just stuff that falls flat, or stuff that's not compelling.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
What's those pain points that those businesses are dealing with?
Right. And for each business we deal with, it's different.
It's different for everyone.
Competition can be that for some, depending on how competitive that business is.
Right.
For like a restaurant, it could even be something as simple as, how on earth do we get people in here on a really snowy day? That's our enemy today.
Yeah.
And can we do a special to get them in? Can we do something that and that could be a price or an item or just what's going to draw people to buy. Well,
and it could, and like you said, it could be a daily pain point. It could be a monthly. It could be a yearly. It could be also like a future pain point. Like we've positioned ourselves to work with them wherever they're at. Like that's I think that's what we pride ourselves in is in making sure that we understand our clients' pain points, and we also know that they're kind of alive. That they're that, like you said, that slider is moving at all times. Like it's not snowing here all the time. In the Midwest where we're at, so we don't have to deal with snow. But it's a good thing to think about that. How do we get people in, or how do we take orders and then get orders out? And
it's extremely dependent on the kind of business. I think businesses that deal with consumers directly, they're not business to business. They deal with consumers.
Right.
This is way more prevalent on a day-to-day basis, right? Or product businesses can be a little bit more regular pivoting depending on what's going on in that market. Mm-hmm. And when I think product, it includes like food stuff too.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, why restaurants have the hardest time, honestly, is that they're consumer facing and it's product. And so that's very flighty. Our moods change constantly. If I have a Mexican restaurant, for instance, people aren't coming there every day for the most part. I as a person don't want Mexican food. In fact, if you're the owner of that restaurant, you probably don't want Mexican food every day.
Right.
So you have to deal with those constantly conflicting things, and there's obviously quality and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for business to business, it's a little different, right? We can tell a long-term story, and if that, especially if we have a professional service we're offering that might be a higher price point, for instance, takes a long time to build up to that. People aren't walking out to spend $2,000 tomorrow. Just not
right.
You have to lead them to that.
That's all a part of the story too. Kind of us being able to tell them where the best place to start is, and that could be budget. The limiting thing could be budget. The limiting thing could be they just not really sure where they want to take it. It could be any number of things, but that is definitely a big part of the story. So that the client knows just how much they can invest in telling that story.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next thing then is context. I wrote down how will solving this problem help my client. That's the kind of questions then we have to ask them, and then we also have to reflect on that as well. Mm-hmm. And then because I think contextually, once we understand that problem, and once the client understands that problem, because sometimes we've had this before too. Like sometimes when we ask them what the problem is, that's not really what the problem actually is, right?
It's funny when you get really close to your business, you don't really see what the actual problem is. You just know what seems to be the headache for you today.
Right.
And that's usually what comes out. And sometimes it's a symptom more so than it's the problem.
Yes.
Right. They'll say, I don't have enough sales. Just generally. Right. And you're like, okay, well, the problem might not be your ability to sell when they're in the store. Maybe it's your ability to get them in the store. And that's not a sales problem.
No.
That's a marketing problem.
Yes.
Or it, in some cases it's a quality problem, or a location problem, or so on and so forth. It can be many things depending on the business. But definitely, I think in those conversations with people, we hear either I don't know, or we hear we hear a symptom more often than we hear an actual problem.
Right.
They haven't really deduced that.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the challenging things for us as marketers, as storytellers, is it would be nice if every time we went to a new client, all we had to do was walk in and they say, this is the exact problem, and it is. And then we just craft our story around that, right?
Right.
But more often than not, we're doing a lot more, we'll get into this a little bit, but we're doing more of the strategy planning for them first.
Right.
Because they don't know what that problem is.
Well, there's some digging, there's some, and digging just in questions, like, and constantly, making sure that we're listening to those problems, but also seeing, like, using our expertise, and like, I don't know if that's actually the problem. And also then, so we're asking ourselves questions too at the same time. So just, that is all, an important part of weaving the stories, because our thing is that we can't solve those pain points if we don't know what those specific pain points are, but also maybe not specific. And like you said, even they may not know.
Yeah.
I mean,
more often than not, they don't know. They really don't. I think
you're too close to it, right? As a business owner?
I think you're too close to it, but we deal with a lot of small businesses. And there's a big difference between our clients that are larger companies and our clients that are smaller companies, right? Mm-hmm. Smaller companies, like, it's, if we're talking to them, it's probably the CEO, the owner of the business, right? And it's their livelihood. This is their salary. This is, if they don't get this right, they're in trouble, either because they took out, debt to do this, or they have left their job to do this, or whatever. And when they're at that point where they're very small, it's oftentimes a 1-2 person business, those kinds of situations. What you find is that they're so concerned about the money, right? And somewhat rightfully so, right? They need money to live.
Important. That's an important part.
But they're thinking about that money so much that it becomes an urgency. And so then it's the only problem they can see. I'm not getting enough sales. I'm not getting enough money. And they don't want to hear that, well, you need to do, X, Y, and Z better in order to, over time, build a better and more consistent clientele, for instance.
Yes.
And there's a marketing aspect to that, but there's also an internal aspect to that. And trying to think of a good example, but really what it comes down to is, if we market really well and we get you, 100 people that have signed up for your email list, but then you don't have a product worth buying, or maybe it's a product that is worthwhile, but you've priced it way too high. Maybe it's double what it should be.
Right.
For instance, that doesn't translate to sales.
No.
And then they think, well, the marketing agency isn't doing their job. And I'm like, well, that's not.
It's not entirely true.
So, we have to walk through that with them and make sure that we're on the same page about that kind of stuff, because though they sometimes see it as irrelevant to what we're doing, it very much is not irrelevant.
Right. Well, it's understanding their processes, it's understanding their product, and then it's understanding who that product is being sold to. Those I mean, you could have the next best thing, and all of a sudden, well, everybody I talk to loves this product and they want it, but no one's buying it. I'm like, well, there's a deeper issue there that needs to be sorted out, because like you said, maybe it's too expensive,
right.
or maybe it's just a niche audience that we need to connect with.
This is a little off topic, but just what I hear people say, well, I asked these people and they all said they would buy it, or that would be a great business to go into. The next question I have is, did you ask all your friends and family? Because they're
that's the first people.
They're not doing it maliciously, but they're not telling you necessarily the brutal, honest truth all the time. Yeah. But pricing can be an issue. Product quality can be an issue for sure. If they can get something of a higher caliber for a lesser cost, well, they're going to do it.
Oh, totally.
Unless they just really want to support a small business.
Right. Well, and I think you brought up a good point, is to it is good to have that sounding board, to not just be your friends and family. Find those people that are going to give you an honest reaction about whatever it is you're planning to do. Because if you don't, then you're, like you said, you're going to get a lot of yes men, and that's not helpful. That's not helpful, and it's not helpful to them and their business, and it's not helpful to us in trying to create a story around their marketing. And then the final part of storytelling is continuity. Telling that story consistently. And to me, that's authenticity. And I think probably one of the most, the most, maybe forgotten about things that, everybody like, oh yeah, I want to be authentic, but they don't really know what that means. It's, it's transparency. It's all of the, nuts and bolts of that's going into their business, and just being themselves. They're selling a widget. They're not just selling that widget. They may be, a pastor at a local church. They may be a community member. They may be, that's all part of the story too. We need to make sure that all of that is told as well. It's not just I'm a plumber and I do this thing.
Yeah. Well, I think people struggle with this concept too. Well, I'll use the example of the plumber. Right.
Sure.
I think they walk into it saying, well, no, I do plumbing. Why do I need a story? Why I do plumbing?
Then what I like to ask next.
Everyone knows what a plumber does, right?
Yeah. Well, then what I know is well, if I can just open my phone and type in plumbing, I can find any plumber.
Right.
What makes you different?
Well, I think people misunderstand what the title of storytelling is.
Yes.
Right. They're like, well, I don't have a 2-page narrative about my sob story that I got to become a plumber.
Right.
That's not what we're talking. I mean, that can be a part of it.
It could be a part of it, but
it can be this emotional story about how we got here, or the meaning behind the work we're doing. Right. But that's not everyone. That's actually not most people.
No.
And I think people confuse that because they're like, well, I don't have that. I'm like, well, you do. There's a reason that you got to where you are.
Yeah.
Is it, did you go into plumbing because of your, because you saw other plumbers and you didn't like what you were seeing? Did you do it because you're building a business around that? Are you going somewhere else with it? Are you the cheapest? Are you the best quality? Are you the quickest? When I think of services like that, plumbing and heating and air, things like that, it's like, sometimes you always want quality, but it's obviously expensive. But a lot of times you're calling because there's an emergency. It's midwinter and
There's
your
a
heat
problem.
goes out. It's your toilet has flooded. It's, whatever. And so that can be a story too. That could be a market niche where you're like, hey, we're always going to be there within an hour, and
Right.
and that can be your story. And if you're consistent with that, you're probably going to build a really great customer base, even in spite of high competition, because if I've got an emergency, I'm calling that guy.
Well, yeah, your story is then spread then too about like, oh, this guy shows up.
Yeah,
I can count on this person.
They took care of me in the middle of the weekend, no problem.
And I thought I was going to go to a hotel because my pipes burst.
Exactly.
I didn't, and they took care of it. Boom, 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 done. Like it's bringing that out, and that's our job. That's our job to ask those questions, to and not that this is in a bad way, like hold that client's hand and then show them, because a lot of clients we work with have never done this, or they've done it in little ways here and there, but they've like, if they're really kind of like jumping in and wanting the full full Pathfinder experience, that can be a little daunting because we offer a lot of services, and I think some businesses kind of like maybe kind of take a step back. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, because because then we're asking a bunch of questions like this, that, and the other thing. But I think it's I enjoy that process with our clients and being able to kind of guide them on that journey, because we were on that journey, right? Like it's we understand that journey,
right?
So a little transition from there. Let's talk about 4 types of storytelling. There's oral, visual, written, and digital. And we'll kind of dive into all of those. So let's talk about all of those, and then let's talk about then how we can work those things into marketing.
Okay, sure. So 4 main types of storytelling. I think it's kind of expanded from the 4 original main types, right? But there's 4 main types. You got oral, visual, written, and digital. Okay. So oral is obviously speaking.
Yeah, what we're doing right now, having a
conversational. It can be, it's the oldest form of storytelling, right? That's how we passed down history originally.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's how we communicate with each other every day. It's all through interactions with each other.
I think too, it can, it can also be like stories we tell ourselves.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
My brand is X, and everyone else is like, that's not what we're all seeing.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so working through that, I think oral can be challenging, right? But, as Pathfinder, we do podcasting now. That's what we're doing right now. And it can be a really effective tool because oral does work really well. People are engaged in hearing a voice, and they feel like they're getting to know a person when they're hearing you. And then there's also just, medium, right? So if I'm driving around, you can't really do visual or something else.
That's right.
Well, I guess you can, but not safely.
I don't know. I mean, there's just something to. I mean, there's something to all of the things that we do, but like there's something to the long form format. Like you said, you're in your car for 20 minutes and you want to throw something on, and it's like, oh, you know what? I want to learn a little bit more how to market myself. Okay, cool. Throw in our strategic storytelling podcast and kind of peruse what's going on there. And like you said, there is a personality there. There is getting to know that business, getting to know the people that are basically behind the mics there, and I think it's exciting, and it's becoming a lower barrier of entry to produce as well.
That's probably the big change.
I think that's the biggest change nowadays. That doesn't mean it's any easier.
No, it's just
changed in how it's changed. Done. I mean, it still takes
the barrier is gone, but it still requires a lot of work.
It requires a lot of work, a lot of equipment and stuff like that. But it's podcasting. I think is a great way to start storytelling, and
I think you see it too on people still today. We go to a lot of like conferences. And you go to hear people on a stage talking, and then they usually have some video content or, some slides or whatever. And that kind of helps but it only just helps solidify what they're talking about.
Right.
It's not the main event, right? We're actually going to see somebody. That's very common still, despite all the other changes in the world. There's lots of other things that we don't go do as much in more of a digital world, but we do go to conferences and listen to speakers.
Right. You want to be inspired.
So, well, and TED Talks too. I mean,
yeah.
Though it is video format, you're listening to somebody talk.
Yeah, it's
more oral than it is visual.
Yes.
But that gives us right into visual. Obviously, video, design, photography. You can tell a story in one picture if you do it right.
Yeah.
So just jumping into those. Obviously, I don't think we have to go deep on this one really, but there are all kinds of ways to tell a story visually. You can do that in lots of formats. People are still experimenting with that today. When you see, shorter form videos on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and Reels, like it's a lot of people at first were like, this is no different than video. And it isn't, but it is. There's kind of a style format to it that's just a little different. And two, again, lower barrier to entry. We're not doing our horizontal widescreen movies anymore.
Right.
It's vertical, like filmed it with my phone.
Literally everybody has a camera in their pocket and ready to be able to do something. Right. And then that's the lower barrier of entry. Does that mean that you have to not pay attention to quality still? Personally,
well, I would never say that.
I would never say that as well. It's and it's just knowing how to use knowing the limitations of that medium, knowing how to use that medium in a very strategic way.
Yep.
Did we want to talk about and then the oral, visual, digital anymore about that? Or
just real quick. So written would be the other. I mean, it's all content that can be as short as your old Twitter feeds, which are kind of going away, but more on that later.
Yeah.
Or long form, storytelling that's written, books and in more of a marketing aspect. That if you ever seen those ads or those posts that are like telling you a story essentially about why this product or why this service or this course is so wonderful. And they did some long form stuff to really draw you into that. And they work pretty well, actually.
Yeah, they do. When they're compelling, when they're interesting, you stop for a second. You stop.
They usually stop you with like, hey, here's a problem. And you're like, I have that problem.
Exactly.
And then you start reading it and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I just spent 5 minutes on that.
Exactly.
Or longer. And then digital is really just, as a definition, is dynamic engagement, right? So that can be done in a lot of ways. There's if we engage with a certain kind of video, we're going to get more of that kind of content. If we engage with an ad, we're going to be led down a customer journey. If we sign up for an email list, we might be sent something each day for 7 days or longer. So on and so forth. But it really, the digital aspect of storytelling is tying together multiple mediums.
Mm-hmm.
There's some written there. There's some visual there. There might be some oral there. There might be photos. There might be videos. There might be design. So it's just really pulling all those things together in a way that I can dynamically engage. And also we can pivot that storytelling depending on what's working, what's not working.
Right.
Or just how we want to continue to build a brand.
Right. And that's basically how we use that within the marketing context. We figure out where where is your audience? Who do you want to contact? A lot of times we get clients that are saying, I want to do this because my competitor is doing that, and we always like to kind of just chuckle a little bit. It's like, okay, that's great. Like, but do you have a plan for that? Like, other than somebody else is doing it?
That is TikTok 101.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, my mini rant. But the question we get the most that we have to deal with, probably the most often that we're kind of shy people away from, is TikTok. And from a storytelling perspective, there's things there, and this is where we get to strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a nice little lead in.
We're getting there, Jesse.
Right? We can tell stories on any platform we want, in any medium that we want. It could be the most compelling, amazing story you've ever seen. If it's not strategically placed, it's going to do nothing for you. And I say that about TikTok specifically because everyone's like, oh, my competitor is doing TikTok, I have to do TikTok, or everyone's talking about it, so we have to do it. the truth of that is your audience is probably not there, depending on your business.
Yeah.
Some businesses there are, but we get a lot of, service professionals, business to business people ask us about using TikTok, and we're like, no, like if I'm a business, I'm not looking on TikTok to buy something in most cases. That's just not. There's maybe a few small niche things, but it's not. If you have a limited budget, which most people do, that's not where we're spending it, guys.
No, yeah, which brings me into a story that leads us right into the strategy part of this. Like when I was running my own production company, and I've told you the story dozens of times, and I think we tell it to dozens of our clients as well. What I would get tasked to do is like create a video, and I would create a great video and maybe a multiple great videos. And then at the end of that, I would give the content and all the videos to the client. And then they're like, what do I do now?
Right.
And I'm like, this is where I wash my hands. Like, I don't, if you didn't think about where you want to go with this now, or you're not talking to anybody about, like, I don't know what to tell you. And that's kind of where our partnership kind of came into play then. Is like, you're like, oh, that's crazy. Like they should have like really thought about, like, because what they did was like their competitor had started doing videos. So they're like, oh no, I need to start doing videos. And I did them, but they had no strategy in how to implement them. So they're just like, I don't know, maybe put it on the website, maybe throw some on Facebook. Sure. But then
it has to be seen by other people, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
To have an impact?
It has some kind of impact.
Crazy thought.
So then, yeah, Jesse was like, okay, well, we need to strategically think about this. And I'm like, great, that's what you're here for. So, yeah, the strategy part was an important piece of the puzzle for me, because then it made sense. Like, also doing all that work for these videos, for them to not really have a strategy made me a little sad. I was just like, I want to help you, but I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the strategy tools to be able to like help them with that.
Yeah. I always love that story about, your business and just how, like, I mean, to me, it always seems a little obvious because that's just like what I do, right? That's just who I am. But to like say, we're going to pay, money for a video or a series of videos, and then like, it would just kind of fall flat because they didn't know what to do. It's like, it's kind of sad.
Right. Thousands of dollars at times.
Yeah. Some of those longer ones. And I always think back to that time and the things that you said about that. And I'm just, I don't know. It always surprised me for sure. But in addition to that, it's like, it's why this worked so well in some ways, because you're like, no, I'm just a videographer. Like I'm telling you a story. I'm a creative. I'll come up, like, it's this fantastic video, whatever. And then, yeah, after that, like there's what next. And so that really leads us to our strategy piece here. Just on marketing strategy in general, so many people are just like taking shots in the dark, Right. And that's why we really talk about strategic storytelling, because as we kind of mentioned earlier, you can tell the best story in the world. It can be the most emotional, most enticing thing. And if you're not doing something with that story or projecting that story in a way that makes sense for an audience you're trying to capture, or in a level of quality that's required, people aren't really going to hear that. And that can be said for all sorts of storytelling, movies, TV shows, whatever. That's why you have TV shows that get canceled. That's why you have movies that flop, right? You almost have to tell a story about why we should go see a movie, and then they tell the story that you actually want to tell, right?
Exactly.
It's the marketing, the trailers that we see. But the same is true for businesses too, I think. I've talked to tons of businesses that, like, I would even tell you their product was the best. Their service was the best. The way they did it was the best. The way they did it was the most, captured me, right? But they don't stay open as businesses because they don't know how to strategically implement that in a way in which they get enough customers, or they charge enough money, or so what have you, to stay in business. I can think of, I even think of, just contractors a lot, right? There's a lot of guys out there, contractors, who they're really good at what they do. They're talented. They know a lot of stuff. You can just say, I have a problem. Can you fix this for me? Right. And they can, for sure. But usually they're just one-man businesses. And they end up never growing past that because They don't know how to project manage. They don't know how to hire and retain employees. They don't know how to expand past just what they're asked to do on a daily basis. So they have years of plenty and years of not much, and that's it. Their business is them, and that's what they do. And I think some want that, but if you ever want to get past that, it requires something more. And I think that's really where the strategy piece comes in.
Yeah. So let's talk about marketing strategy, and maybe, since we've been using the plumber analogy, like what what would be a marketing strategy?
We didn't even plan this plumber analogy. We're just going with
it. We're rolling with it. So because I think people are like, well, strategy means a plan. We're like, okay, yeah, it means that, but I think it's a lot more.
Well, I think the plumber is a really good example because I would say strategy changes based on what you're doing, right?
Yes.
If you're doing something that people don't understand, strategy is very different than if you're doing something that people do understand. People understand what plumbing is.
Yes.
If I have a leaky toilet, I'm calling a plumber.
Right.
If I have, just a hose spraying everywhere, I'm maybe calling a plumber. If something's clogged, I'm calling the plumber.
Right.
So, it's very obvious to people what they do, right? There's not much mystery there.
Right.
I think though, what a lot of plumbers miss is like, well, if it's not that much of a mystery, I'm not saying it's not a technical, difficult skill, but it's one that many people have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a community. And so if and it's also a low barrier to entry because you can have a one-man business and be a plumber, whereas other businesses, you can't do that.
You need tools and knowledge.
So how, the strategy there then is, how am I going to set myself apart from others? And not even just that, but you have to really think about strategy longer term too. Like if I'm better than everybody else, and so I start getting all the calls, but then I have to say no to half of them because it's too many calls, right?
That's an issue too.
You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit because your business can't grow from there. And again, some people want it that way, but I would say most don't. So, just thinking about that, like, a plumber is probably naturally not really good at hiring employees and doing the things needed for employees. They may not be good at keeping their books, their numbers. They may not know, can I hire someone or not, and how much to pay them. They may not know how to provide enough good customer service to adequately handle the incoming needs in a way that doesn't start to make people frustrated or angry. So those are the parts of the strategy, I think, that are really important. And some people are like, well, that's just business planning. And I say, no, it's not. Business planning is much more, here's what I'm going to go do, right? Mm-hmm. And strategy is much more of a way we're going to do things, right? And so when things don't go the way we planned, the strategy should pick up the slack of that, right? And that's harder for smaller businesses, and it's I think a lot of them don't deal with strategy much because they're saying, I'm just trying to make a living,
right? Well, and I think
how can I think about the next step?
Exactly, and I think the key point from there is, at least to me, is a business plan is kind of like you said, a very general, like, here's what I'm going to do. But the strategy is more micro and kind of getting it, like, and then also like, here, the strategy is, here's what I'm going to do, but also if this doesn't go the way I need it to, then here's what I'm going to do after that. Like it gives you, it's more of a process, where the plan is just kind of like, well, I hope this is how this goes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I used to write a lot of business plans when I was a little bit younger, and I think there's a lot of value to them. I wouldn't recommend going into business without some kind of plan. Does it need to be a 50-page document? No, not necessarily, but you need to really make sure you've thought through everything. I think the business plan as a document is a good place to make sure I thought about all the buckets of things I needed to think about, and I've maybe addressed some simple things, like this is the software I'm going to use to make sure accounting occurs. This is the platforms I'm planning to use for marketing, for instance. Or here's my logo and my brand. Here's the services I'm going to offer, and here's the ones I'm not. Right, that's the plan. But then you get into business, and then it's not really what you think. It just it almost never is. Right. Back to your business. Before Pathfinder, you were like, I'm doing video. Talented at video. I'm talented at storytelling. I'm good at creative. I need some equipment. right? That's your business plan. I need some clients, and I'm going to make the videos. And what you were starting to find is that worked okay. And then all of a sudden, everyone was saying, well, what do I do now? And I think one of your biggest issues at that time was
having
everyone's
customers.
happy with what I produced.
Yeah.
The clients aren't upset, but they're not coming back. Why aren't they coming back?
Having the repeat customers.
And it's because they paid dollars for product. And then they said, oh, the return on investment's not there. And the return on investment piece was not your requirement.
No.
It was not a part of your contract to tell them how to use this item to get that return. But unfortunately, you're in the position where it bites you anyway.
Right.
And that's I think what happens to a lot of business to business businesses, where it's like the customer doesn't know what to do next. You know, I think that's why, and I think it does do business to consumer too. I think more and more you're just inundated with like, you know, I bought a product, but that business needs to stay in business. So now they're sending you lots of emails to try to buy more product, right? Or subscription models and so on and so forth. But trying to build that recurring revenue and really figuring out how we're going to manage this long term.
Well, yeah, and that brings me into like, you know, the strategy. Having a strategy helps the business make decisions, and not just day-to-day decisions about the future.
Well, and I can speak to that really well. I think the thing that happens if you don't have a strategy is that you end up doing a lot of things that you shouldn't be doing. Right. That can look a lot of different ways too.
Well, that was exactly me. I was just kind of doing the shotgun approach and like, well, this kind of worked.
So we'll try that.
Yeah. But then I was spinning my wheels and I was working tons of hours and only seeing a little bit of result. And I was exhausted. So
I think it looks a lot of different ways. I think in just like professional services businesses, that can look like, oh my gosh, sales aren't happening. We must be doing something wrong. Guys, let's have more meetings. We need to talk about why it's not working. And really all you needed to be doing was telling your story better, or like going out and making the sales in some cases. But I think that's what happens. You end up, your focus gets so all over the place. Another example, I'm sure we've all been to a store. Maybe we happened in there when traveling. Maybe it's a local store, whatever. And they're like, this store it sells X, you know, we sell this. We're this kind of a store. And then you get in there and you see, well, you got Y and Z and A and B and C here too. What is this? And, you know, some people would say, well, that's a Dollar General, but but that's made for that, right? I'm talking about the small businesses that are like, what are you doing? Yeah, it happens with restaurants a lot. Their menu kind of explodes. And you're like, I went to a diner and I'm being offered fine Italian cuisine and tacos.
Right.
And you're like, what? So none of it's going to be that good.
Right.
Obviously. But like, it's just kind of all over the place. And you're like, what is the brand here? Well, what are we doing?
As consumers, we kind of want less decisions. We just want, like, if you're going in and thinking I'm having Italian, okay, cool. I'm going to get the lasagna. And I will wait. Tacos, a hamburger, like I'm confused now. And then now there's too many, you know, now I'm asking myself questions. So like, well, maybe
I just have a short story. So, you know, I know a guy, he's an accountant, and we'd go to lunch, but he doesn't really like Mexican food, but it's like it's the only place close by. So we always go to this Mexican place, and he buys the cheeseburger. He's like, it's the best. It's one of the best cheeseburgers I've had. And I just think that's so funny because I'm like, this is just so wrong.
He's
like,
going to a Mexican.
You're telling them this is okay, and it's not. I always find that kind of funny.
Playing into it. Let's see. What have we not talked about? I think to be honest with you, I think we've talked about story. We've talked about strategy. Now we need to bring it home and bring it together. And also it's the name of our podcast, Strategic Storytelling. So why is it important to frame your marketing into a story?
Sure. So like we said, this is like Pathfinder is all about marrying these two things. When we started Pathfinder, when we merged the businesses and came together.
Well, we knew our strengths.
Yeah, it was strategy. It was
storytelling,
marketing, storytelling. And we kind of married that. And what's so important about that is like, if you're on one boat or the other, you're missing half the half the thing.
Right.
Right. If you're in strategy all the way, well, you might have some really great ideas. Your business model might be incredible and your story is not being told. Right. You might not, or it's being told in an uncompelling way. I've seen that a lot too. I've seen, if you've ever been like to a trade show or an event and you get this flyer and it's just like text.
It's just text.
It's just like, well, there's some design elements around it, kind of wrap it. But it's like just paragraphs. And like, you're like, no one's reading that.
No.
And that's to explain the business that you got the flyer for.
It's important to them. But once you get that as a consumer, you're like, I'm not reading all this.
And if you try them out, they might be the best business ever. It might be the best cost, might be the best customer service. But the marketing is just bad. The storytelling is bad.
Yeah.
And so, but if you have the storytelling piece without the marketing, without the strategy, you get the beautiful video that the client goes, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, where do I
put this? Where does this live?
How do people watch this?
Exactly.
So I think that's really the marriage of those two, and they're vitally important for each other. And it's a constant battle. Like I think it's important to say this is not
quite
easy.
Literally. Sometimes there's a battle.
I mean, we just last night we were going back and forth about a design for a logo, and there was very clearly different sides to, being drawn on whether we thought this was a good logo or not.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because I was like, hey, I'm not really knocking the design. Like there's nothing here that's like, that is ugly. Like what?
Right.
Those colors don't work. Like it wasn't like that. It was from my perspective,
right,
to the creative team was, I don't think that's telling the story in the way that people need to hear it, because this business that we were dealing with is not, it's not a plumber. It's not a normal business. It's not a service that people are going to be like, I know exactly what they do on day one. And so I was like, I think we needed to like pick a design that's still the same caliber of quality, but that speaks to that a little bit better. And so, but that's the battle we have back and forth.
Oh yeah. And then it is
healthy battle.
It's a completely healthy battle. And I think, and to be honest with you, I think our clients get the best of that. Like
they do.
The fact that we really are looking at it from both of our perspectives, and also then we need to marry both of those together in the piece that we put out. That's important. Like, and because if it was the most, and that's we can do that. We can make the most beautiful logo ever. But if it means nothing, and if it doesn't, if it's not able to be woven into the strategy, it doesn't matter then. Like exactly. So,
well, I think one of the benefits of our company is that we do all these things, right? And so often I hear businesses say, I got a guy. We already have a logo because I got a guy, I got a girl, and she did this, and whatever. And we get that file, that logo, and we look at it and we're like, okay, we're not trying to like knock what was done here. I don't know if it was like your family member, your friend, or whatever. But
well, first of all, it's a JPEG and it's uneditable.
The wrong design files are always a huge part of that. That happens like almost every time. If you're not in a professional setting, that's just what happens. But more often than not, we're like, hey, this is too busy. This is not really telling who you are. And half the time you get a business owner that came up with the name of the business as well. And they good, right, wrong, good or bad, they have an emotional attachment to it.
Right.
But you're like, hey, you might need to really rethink your entire business name because it's just not doing you any favors.
Right. One, they're also not thinking about, so they've got it on a sheet of paper that's right in front of them or on a computer screen. And that size, you're like, okay, that maybe makes sense. Maybe it looks great on a truck. But then what if you want to shrink it down to putting it on your shirt, putting it on a hat?
Well, I've seen some like it's like 10 different colors.
Yeah, that too.
That's exaggerating, but 5 or
7,
6, right?
6 or 7.
And then they like go to put it on a shirt and they're like, well, that's, an additional charge per color. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not practical.
No.
So there's some of that too as we think about design and color scheme too. We don't use that logo for the white sheet of paper with text on it, right? Where like, sure, it shines really nice on that piece of paper.
That is one facet.
We use it, to decide colors for your website,
Mm-hmm.
to help that brand alignment. We use it for social media purposes. We use it for everything. And if you have 7 main colors,
Right.
or
One,
one color, like you need more than that.
The strategy of your brand is a visual through line, and from website to flyer to card to video to whatever else you're putting, to apparel.
I think that's what people don't understand these days too with the website piece is like, it used to be like, let's just go back 50 years, right? If you wanted to do business, people were coming to your place of business. It did not matter what you were offering, right? You could be offering marketing services, and everyone's coming to your place of business to have the meeting. They're going to fly to you. They're going to travel downtown to you. That's what's happening, right? No matter what, we're gonna do that. Now with the digital era, there's tons of businesses that have no physical location you can go visit, and you're buying everything online, and they have employees in 10 cities and so on and so forth. And so what people miss about that from a brand perspective and the strategic perspective as well is your website is your home. It is the place.
It's your digital
that
home.
It tells everyone who you are and what you do and what your story is. And you get so many of these people just throwing up, I just need a page just thrown up, and I'll just avoid the it's ugly thing there's no purpose to it. There's no call to action. There's no through line. And it just ends up
it's
not
checking a box. It's just like, we did it.
Yeah, we did the website because everyone does a website, right?
But it's like,
and they're missing the point.
It's like, well, where's your story? Where's what do
you want people to do?
What do you want? And then because that's the thing. Like, once you go to the website, like, now what? As a consumer, if I go to a website and then I don't know what to do, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, they're gone.
I'm gone. I'm like,
and it's so much easier to be gone now that they're not walking through your door where you can capture them. You got to capture them without your face and without your personality, and without your pulling. There's just, it's a very different world.
Yeah,
and people are missing that.
And that's, again, we ask questions. We attempt to get all of that information from you, and if and once we show you a mock-up or show you something, and if it's still not there, like, then we have more questions to ask, because if there's something missing from the story, that's on the client and on us to be able to kind of work together, like, find where those missing pieces are.
I think this can kind of get to our wrap up.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing too that happens a lot, and this is more of a practical thing but it kind of leads into this, is that sometimes we'll get hired to do a logo. That's it. Or a website. That's it. Or we want you to do social media, but somebody else has already done our website. We don't want you to touch that. Yeah. So on and so forth. We're getting one piece of the pie. And, it used to be okay. Marketing used to be that way.
Sure.
You could have multiple agencies do multiple things, no problem. But in the digital age where everything is very connected and also help and hurt each other in terms of platforms or website or Google search or whatever, the reason that we always try to pull people in to do more with us is, obviously there's a revenue benefit.
Yeah.
But if we can say we're doing everything for you, we can also dictate and help lead people through the process of, we need your social media statements and posts to match the brand on your website, so that when they see the social media post that leads them to your website, they're not like, where did I just end up? This is not what I thought I clicked on.
Right.
And really, like, just create that through line and consistency. And that'll help, because it's all a funnel. It's all a sales funnel at some level, whether that be, I want them to get to my website so they come to my store, whether it's I want them to just do a quick buy online, whether it's I want them to contact me or sign up for my email list, doesn't matter. Whatever you want them to do, if you don't have that clear path, that straight line from I did this, then this, then this, no matter where I entered that funnel, you're going to lose people through that process. And the more consistent you can make that, the better chances you have in an already very loud world of getting somebody to do what you want them to do, to get them to a point where they are going to show up, buy something, whatever it is. And that's really, I think, the marrying of storytelling and strategy. we're storytelling to lead them down the path, and we're strategically placing that path so that you get to the end goal.
I think that sums it up pretty darn nicely. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning into Strategic Storytelling with Jesse and Brian.
If you want to learn more about marketing and strategic storytelling for your business, subscribe to our podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Strategic Storytelling, a Pathfinder podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow our socials. For more information, visit our website, yourpathfinder.io.